Extraterrestrials looked for who dropped gifts at the battle monument. It was the opponent human fighter. Part 1. The old walked slowly through the morning fog. His name was Ara, and he had been the keeper of the monument for 40 years. His shell had turned with age, and his 4 legs moved carefully over the stone path. But his eyes were still sharp, and his mind was still clear. The monument stood in the center of a valley on the planet Aura. It was a tall structure made of black stone, reaching toward the purple sky. On its surface were carved 12,000 names. Each name belonged to a soldier who had died defending this world against the humans 30 years ago. Ara remembered the war. He had been young then, a soldier himself. He had watched his friends die in the burning fields. He had heard their screams as human weapons tore through their lines. The humans had come with their ships and their guns, and they had fought back with everything they had. In the end, both sides had been too tired to continue. The war ended not with victory but with exhaustion. The humans went back to their worlds. They buried their dead, and life continued, though nothing was ever the same. Now Ara served the dead instead of fighting alongside the living. Every morning he walked to the monument to clean it, to tend the ground around it, and to say the old prayers for the fallen. It was quiet work, lonely work, but it gave him peace. This morning, however, something was different. As he approached the base of the monument, Ara stopped. His antennae twitched with surprise. There, resting against the black stone, were objects that did not belong. A bunch of flowers, red as blood, with soft petals and green stems. A small glass bottle filled with golden liquid, and a piece of folded cloth, colored in patterns that Ara recognized immediately. Human military colors. He stood very still for a long moment, staring at the offerings. His old heart beat faster in his chest. This was not the first time. Ara bent down slowly and picked up one of the flowers. He brought it close to his face and breathed in its scent, sweet and strange, like nothing that grew on Aura. These flowers came from Earth, the human. He was certain of it. He had found similar offerings before. Every year on the anniversary of the battle's final day, these gifts appeared at the monument. Flowers, liquid, cloth, always the same, always placed with care. For 22 years, this had been happening. At first, Ara had told no one. He had assumed it was some mistake, some accident. Perhaps a human traveler had wandered too close and left something behind. But the offerings kept coming, year after year, always on the same day. This was no accident. Someone was doing this on purpose. But who and why? The war had ended, but peace between humans and was cold at best. They traded with each other now. They signed agreements, but they did not trust each other. Too much blood had been spilled. Too many wounds remained open. Why would any human honor dead? The very idea seemed impossible. Ara carefully gathered the offerings and carried them to his small house near the monument. He placed them on his table and looked at them for a long time. Then he made a decision. He had kept this secret for too long. It was time to tell someone. The next day, Ara traveled to the capital city to meet with the High Council. The council chamber was a vast hall with curved walls and soft blue lights. The 7 council members sat in a half circle, their shells gleaming in the dim glow. They were the leaders of the people, wise and powerful. Ara stood before them and told his story. He spoke of the offerings he had found over the years. He showed them pictures he had taken. He described the flowers, the liquid, the cloth. The council members listened in silence. When he finished, they looked at each other with confusion and concern. "You are certain these are human objects?" asked High Counselor Hose, the eldest of them. "I am certain," Ara replied. "The flowers are from Earth. The cloth bears human military symbols. Someone is coming to our sacred ground and leaving these things." "This is disturbing," said another counselor, a female named. "The monument is holy, only should walk there." "Perhaps it is a threat," suggested a younger counselor. "A message of some kind. Humans have strange ways of showing dominance. Or perhaps, Hose said slowly, it is something else entirely, something we do not understand. The council debated for many hours. Some were angry, some were worried, some were curious. In the end, they reached a decision. They would send someone to investigate. They would find out who was leaving these offerings and why. And they would make sure this human, whoever they were, answered for entering sacred ground. The task fell to a young intelligence officer named Al. He was smart and careful, with a reputation for solving difficult problems. He had never fought in the war, but he had grown up hearing stories of human cruelty. Like most young, he did not think highly of the species that had killed so many of his people. When Al received his orders, he felt a mix of duty and disgust. Finding one human among billions would be difficult, but he would do it. And when he found this intruder, he would make them pay for their disrespect. He began his investigation the very next day. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, an old man sat alone on a quiet farming moon. His name was Cole, and he was 73 years old. His hair had turned white and his body had grown weak with age. But his mind was still sharp, and his memories were still clear. Too clear sometimes. Looked out his window at the fields of grain stretching toward the horizon. It was peaceful here, far from the noise and chaos of human civilization. He had chosen this place because he wanted to be left alone. He wanted to forget. But he could not forget, not completely, not ever. Every night when he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of those he had killed. Soldiers fighting to protect their home. They had been his enemies, but they had also been brave. They had died with honor. And every year, on a certain day, made a journey. He traveled across the cold emptiness of space to a planet called Aura. He walked through the morning fog to a black stone monument, and he left his offerings for the dead. No one knew he did this. No one would understand if he told them. But it did not matter. He was not doing it for anyone else. He was doing it for himself and for them. Extraterrestrials looked for who dropped gifts at the battle monument. It was the opponent human fighter. Part 2. Al began his investigation with the security recordings from the monument. They had placed cameras around the sacred site many years ago, not because they expected intruders, but because it was standard practice. Now those cameras would tell him who had been visiting. He sat in his office and watched hours of footage. Days passed as he searched through the recordings, looking for anything unusual. But he found nothing. The offerings always appeared during a brief window when the cameras showed only fog and darkness. The intruder knew exactly where the blind spots were. This was not some random visitor. This was someone who had planned carefully. Al felt a cold anger growing inside him. Whoever this human was, they were clever. But Al was clever too. He decided to approach the problem from a different direction. Instead of looking for the person, he would look for the objects they left behind. The flowers were his first lead. Ara had said they were from Earth, and Al confirmed this through his research. They were called roses, and they only grew on the human. To get roses to Aura, someone would have to import them through official channels. There would be records. Al spent weeks going through shipping documents and trade reports. He contacted customs offices on a dozen worlds. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. Small packages of roses had been shipped to a station near space once a year for the past 2 decades. The buyer used different names each time, but the delivery address was always the same. A private shipping locker on Waypoint Station, a place where many species met for trade and travel. The liquid was his next clue. Analysis showed it was a human drink called whiskey, but not just any whiskey. This was a special kind, made only in a region called Kentucky on Earth. Only 200 bottles were produced each year, and they were very expensive. Finding buyers of this rare whiskey was easier than finding rose buyers. The makers kept detailed records of every sale. Al obtained these records through contacts in human space, trading favors and information. One name appeared multiple times in the sales records. Someone had been buying this specific whiskey for many years and having it shipped to locations near territory. The name was Cole. Al searched for information about this human. What he found made his blood run cold. Cole had served in the Terran Expeditionary Fleet during the war. He had been a commander, leading soldiers into battle against forces. His service record was mostly classified, hidden behind walls of military secrecy. But one detail was clear. Commander Cole had been present at the Siege of Valley. Not just present, he had led the final assault. Al stared at his screen, reading the information again and again. This made no sense. Cole was not just any human soldier. He was the human soldier, the one who had broken through defenses, the one whose attack had killed thousands. Why would such a man honor dead? Was this some kind of sick joke, a way to mock the fallen? Humans were known for their strange sense of humor. Perhaps this was their idea of a game. Or perhaps it was something darker, a threat disguised as respect. Al reported his findings to the High Council. They were as confused as he was. "You are certain this is the same human?" High Counselor Hose asked. "I am certain," Al replied. "The evidence is clear. Cole, former commander of the human forces at Valley, has been visiting our monument for over 20 years. "This is an insult," said, her voice sharp with anger. "He slaughtered our people and now he pretends to honor them. It is disgusting." "We do not know his reasons," another counselor said. "Perhaps we should find out before we judge." "What reasons could there possibly be?" demanded. "He is a murderer, a killer of thousands. His presence on our sacred ground is a crime." The council argued for many hours. In the end, they decided that Al should continue his investigation. He would find Cole, he would confront him, and he would learn the truth. Al prepared for his journey. He would have to travel through human space to reach Cole, which meant passing through territory where his kind was not welcome. The war had ended, but hatred remained. Many humans still blamed for the deaths of their soldiers. Many would be happy to hurt if they had the chance. But Al was not afraid. He had a mission and he would complete it. The journey took several weeks. Al traveled on trade ships and passenger vessels, keeping a low profile. He passed through human stations where people stared at him with suspicion and distrust. He heard whispers behind his back, words like bug and enemy and worse things. He ignored them all. He had a purpose. Finally, he reached the farming moon where Cole lived. It was a small world, green and quiet, far from major trade routes. The kind of place where someone might go to disappear. Al landed his shuttle near a small settlement and began asking questions. The humans here were simple farming folk, suspicious of strangers but not hostile. When he asked about Cole, they pointed toward a small house on the edge of the settlement. "Old man lives alone," one farmer told him. "Keeps to himself mostly, doesn't cause trouble." "Does he have visitors?" Al asked. "Never," the farmer said. "Been here 15 years, never seen anyone visit him." Al walked toward the small house. His hearts were beating fast in his chest. He had come so far, searched for so long. Now he would finally meet the human who had killed his people and then dared to honor them. He did not know what to expect: a monster, a madman, a criminal hiding from justice. The house was simple, made of wood and stone. Smoke rose from a small chimney. Outside, a garden grew with earth, vegetables, and flowers. Among them, Al noticed roses, red roses, the same kind left at the monument. He walked to the front door and knocked. For a long moment there was silence. Then he heard slow footsteps approaching. The door opened, and Al found himself face to face with Cole. The human was old. His skin was wrinkled, his hair white as snow. He walked with the careful steps of someone whose body was failing them. But his eyes were sharp and clear, the eyes of a soldier. Those eyes looked at Al without surprise, without fear, without anything except a deep and terrible tiredness. "I was wondering when you would come," said quietly. "I suppose I knew this day would arrive eventually." Al did not know what to say. He had prepared angry words, accusations, demands for answers, but something in the old man's voice made those words die in his throat. "You know why I am here," Al finally said. "Yes," replied. "You want to know about the monument, about the flowers and the whiskey." "I want to know why," Al said. "Why does the man who killed 12,000 soldiers honor their memory?" Looked at him for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and gestured toward the inside of his house. "Come in," he said. "This is not a story to tell standing in a doorway. It is a long story and a painful one, but you deserve to hear it." Al hesitated. Every instinct told him to be careful. This human had been a deadly warrior once. But looking at the frail old man before him, Al saw no threat. He saw only sadness. He stepped inside. Extraterrestrials looked for who dropped gifts at the battle monument. It was the opponent human fighter. Part 3. The inside of Cole's house was simple and clean. There was a small kitchen, a sitting area with 2 worn chairs, and shelves filled with books. On one wall hung a single picture frame containing a faded photograph of soldiers in human military uniforms. On another wall was something that made Al stop and stare. It was a war banner, torn and burned at the edges but still recognizable, the symbol of the 3rd Division, one of the units that had fought at Valley. "Where did you get that?" Al asked, his voice sharp. "I took it," said simply. "From the battlefield after the fighting ended. I have kept it ever since." "That is a war trophy," Al said, "a sign of victory over your enemies." "No," replied. "It is a reminder of what happened there and what I did." He walked slowly to one of the chairs and sat down with a tired sigh. He gestured for Al to take the other chair. After a moment of hesitation, Al sat. Reached for a bottle on a nearby table. It was the same golden liquid that had been left at the monument. He poured some into 2 small glasses and offered one to Al. "It is called whiskey," said. "Humans drink it when they need courage or when they want to forget." Al looked at the glass but did not take it. "I did not come here to drink with you. I came here for answers." "And you will have them," said. He took a sip from his own glass and closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they were filled with old pain. "You want to know why I visit the monument," said. "You think I am mocking your dead, insulting their memory. I understand why you would think that, but you are wrong." "Then explain," Al demanded. "Make me understand." Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was distant, like a man speaking from another time. "The siege of Valley lasted for 47 days, he began. "I was a commander then, leading an assault unit. Our orders were to break through defenses and capture the central command bunker. We knew it would be bloody. We knew many of us would die, but we were soldiers and we followed our orders." He paused and took another sip of whiskey. "Your people fought harder than anyone expected. Every inch of ground cost us lives. My soldiers fell around me day after day. Friends I had known for years died screaming in that valley. I hated your people then. I hated them with every part of my soul." Al listened in silence. He had heard stories of the siege from the side. Now he was hearing it from the enemy. "On the final day we broke through," continued. "My unit reached the command bunker. Our orders were clear: take the bunker, eliminate all resistance, no survivors." His hands tightened around his glass. "We fought our way inside, killed the guards, pushed deeper and deeper. I expected to find more soldiers. I expected a final battle. But when we reached the central chamber—" Stopped, his face twisted with a memory that still hurt after all these years. "What did you find?" Al asked quietly. "Wounded," said. "Dozens of wounded soldiers lying on the floor, too hurt to fight. Medics trying to help them. young cadets barely old enough to hold weapons, and in the middle of them all a commander, a general based on his markings. General Eth, Al said. He knew the name from history. General Eth had been the commander of forces at Valley. He had died in the battle, or so the record said. Yes, nodded General Eth. He was standing in the center of the room, surrounded by civilians, families, Al, wives and children who had been trapped in the bunker when the fighting started. They had nowhere else to go. Set down his glass and looked directly at Al. My orders said no survivors. My orders said to eliminate everyone in that bunker. I had my weapon in my hand. My soldiers were waiting for my command. What did you do? Al asked. I looked at General Eth, said, and he looked at me. We did not speak the same language. We had no way to communicate. But in that moment I understood him perfectly. He was not afraid to die. He was afraid for the people behind him. He was ready to fight to the last breath to protect them. His voice grew thick with emotion. I had spent 47 days hatting your people, 47 days watching my friends die. I had every reason to pull that trigger, every reason to follow my orders. He paused. But I could not do it. I could not kill wounded soldiers and medics and children. I could not slaughter civilians. I was a soldier, not a butcher. There is a difference, Al. There has to be a difference. Otherwise, what are we fighting for? Al felt something shift inside him. He had expected excuses, lies, manipulation. He had not expected this. What happened next? He asked. I told my soldiers the bunker was clear, said. I lied to them. I told them the structure was unstable and we needed to withdraw immediately. While we pulled back, I made sure there was a gap in our lines, a path to the maintenance tunnels that led out of the valley. He took a shaky breath. General Eth understood. He gathered his wounded, his medics, his civilians. He led them out through those tunnels. The last thing I saw was him looking back at me, just one look. Then he was gone. He survived, Al said. It was not a question. He survived, confirmed. I learned later that he made it to a rescue ship. He lived for another 15 years before dying of old age. The civilians survived too. The wounded soldiers, the medics, the cadets, they all lived. Looked at the war banner on his wall. But 12,000 of your people did not live. They died in that valley fighting against my soldiers, fighting against me. I killed many of them myself, not in that bunker but in the days and weeks before, in fair combat, soldier against soldier. He turned back to Al. I do not apologize for that. War is war. Your people were my enemies and I fought them with everything I had, but I also respected them. They were brave. They were skilled. They died protecting their home and their families. And so you visit the monument, Al said slowly, to honor those you killed. Yes, said, humans have a tradition. We respect those who fight with courage, even our enemies. Your people fought with more courage than any enemy I ever faced. They deserve to be remembered. They deserve to be honored. He picked up his glass again and held it up, as if making a toast to invisible spirits. The roses are for beauty. The whiskey is for courage. The cloth is a burial shroud, what humans wrap our dead soldiers in when we lay them to rest. These are the gifts we give our own fallen heroes. Your soldiers earned those gifts. Al sat in silence, trying to absorb everything he had heard. His entire understanding of this human was breaking apart and reforming into something new. You committed treason, he finally said. You disobeyed your orders. You could have been executed. I was discharged, said. My superiors suspected the truth, but they could not prove it. The war ended 3 days later and everyone wanted to forget. So I was sent away quietly and no one spoke of it again. And you have carried this alone for 30 years. Yes, said, alone. Al looked at the old soldier sitting before him. He saw the weight of those 30 years in every line of his face, in every hair on his head, in the deep tiredness behind his eyes. This was not a monster. This was not a criminal. This was a man who had carried an impossible burden for longer than Al had been alive. And Al did not know what to do with that knowledge. Extraterrestrials looked for who dropped gifts at the battle monument. It was the opponent human fighter. Part 4. Al stayed in Cole's house for 3 days. He told himself it was because he needed more information for his report, but the truth was more complicated than that. Everything he thought he knew about humans was falling apart. He had grown up hearing stories of human cruelty, stories of the war, of the terrible things humans had done to soldiers. His teachers had taught him that humans were brutal creatures who fought without honor. His family had lost members in the war, and they spoke of humans with hatred in their voices. Now he sat across from a human who had risked everything to save lives, a human who had been visiting sacred ground for over 20 years to honor the dead, a human who wept when he spoke of the soldiers he had killed. On the second day, Al finally asked the question that had been burning inside him. "Why do you care?" he said. "You were enemies, you owed them nothing. Why does it matter to you what happened to soldiers?" Was quiet for a long moment. He looked out the window at his garden, where roses grew alongside vegetables from a dozen different worlds. "When I was young," he began, "my father taught me something. He said that the true measure of a person is not how they treat their friends, it is how they treat their enemies." He turned to look at Al. Anyone can be kind to people they love. Anyone can show respect to their allies, but it takes something more to show respect to those who have tried to kill you. It takes strength, real strength, the kind that comes from inside. Stood up slowly and walked to the window. "I have killed many beings in my life, Al, humans and others. In battle I showed no mercy. I could not afford to. War does not allow for mercy in the moment, but war does not last forever. And when the fighting stops, we have to find a way to live with what we have done." He touched the glass of the window gently. Some soldiers deal with this by telling themselves that their enemies were monsters, that they deserved to die, that killing them was good and right. I have known many soldiers like this. It helps them sleep at night. His voice grew soft. "But I could not do that. I saw your soldiers, Al. I fought them face to face. I watched them die. They were not monsters. They were warriors just like me. They had families, hopes, dreams. They loved their world and their people. They died protecting everything they believed in." He turned back to Al. "How could I call them monsters? How could I pretend their lives meant nothing? They were enemies, yes, but they were also worthy of respect. Pretending otherwise would be a lie, and I have told too many lies in my life already." Al listened in silence. Something was changing inside him, something deep and fundamental. He could feel his old hatred weakening, being replaced by something he had never expected to feel for a human. Respect. "After the war ended," continued, "I tried to forget. I went back to Earth. I tried to live a normal life, but the memories followed me everywhere. I could not sleep. I could not find peace. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of those I had killed." He sat back down in his chair, his old bones creaking. "One day, about 8 years after the war, I found myself standing at a human war memorial. It was built to honor our soldiers who had died in the conflict. I stood there looking at the names carved in stone, and I realized something." He looked directly into Al's eyes. "Your dead had no one to remember them. On the human side, we built monuments and held ceremonies. We spoke of our fallen as heroes, but who spoke for who honored their sacrifice?" "We have our own monuments," Al said, "our own ceremonies." "Yes," agreed, "but not from your enemies. In human tradition, it is considered honorable to acknowledge the courage of those you fought against. It shows that you saw them as equals, as warriors, not as prey." He picked up his glass of whiskey, but did not drink from it. "I decided that I would be the one to honor them. I would be the one human who remembered the dead as they deserved to be remembered, not as monsters we defeated, not as enemies we destroyed, but as soldiers who fought and died with honor. And so you began visiting the monument, Al said. It took me 2 years to find a way, said. Space was not welcoming to humans, especially human soldiers. I had to be careful. I studied the security around the monument, learned its patterns. I found a way to approach without being seen. He smiled faintly. The first time I left my offerings, I was terrified. I thought I would be caught, arrested, executed. But I also knew that I had to do this. It was the only way I could make peace with what I had done. Did it help? Al asked. Considered the question. Yes and no, he said. The guilt never goes away completely. The faces never stop haunting me. But honoring the dead gives meaning to their deaths. It tells them and it tells me that their lives mattered, that they were seen, that they are remembered. He finally took a drink from his glass. I have been doing this for 22 years now. Every year, on the anniversary of the final day, I make the journey. I bring roses because they represent beauty that grows even in dark places. I bring whiskey because it represents courage and sacrifice. I bring the burial cloth because it is what we give our own heroes. He set down the glass. I will continue until I die, and when I die, the offerings will stop. But for now, as long as I draw breath, I will honor the dead of Valley. On the third day, Al prepared to leave. He had gathered enough information for his report, but he found himself hesitating at the door. I do not know what to tell the council, he admitted. They expect me to bring back a criminal, an intruder who violated our sacred ground. Instead, I have found. He struggled to find the right words. You have found a tired old man who cannot forget, said quietly. You can tell them that if you wish. Tell them I am no threat. Tell them I mean no disrespect. Or tell them nothing at all. It does not matter to me. It matters to me, Al said. Looked at him with something like sadness. You are young, he said. You did not fight in the war. You grew up with stories of human evil, just as human children grew up with stories of cruelty. We teach our young to hate the enemy because it is easier than teaching them to understand. He walked slowly toward Al. But hatred is a poison, Al. It eats away at everything good inside us. I learned this the hard way. I spent years hating your people, and that hatred nearly destroyed me. It was only when I learned to see as beings worthy of respect that I found any peace. He reached out and, to Al's surprise, placed a hand on his shoulder. You have a choice now. You can go back to your people and continue the cycle of hatred. Tell them I am a criminal, a violator, an enemy. Or you can tell them the truth. Tell them that sometimes enemies can also be honorable. That sometimes the ones who hurt us the most can also be the ones who teach us the most. Al felt the weight of that hand on his shoulder. It was the hand that had killed thousands of his people. It was also the hand that had saved dozens of others. Both things were true. Both things had to be true. I will tell them the truth, Al said finally. Whatever happens after that is not mine to control. Nodded and removed his hand. That is all any of us can do, he said. Tell the truth and hope it matters. Al left the farming moon that day. But he knew, deep in his heart, that he was not the same who had arrived 3 days ago. Something had changed forever. Extraterrestrials looked for who dropped gifts at the battle monument. It was the opponent human fighter. Part 5. Al stood before the High Council and told them everything. He told them about the security footage and the shipping records. He told them about the roses and the whiskey and the burial cloth. He told them about finding coal on a quiet farming moon, an old man living alone with his memories. And then he told them the story that had shared with him, the story of the final day at Valley, the story of General Eth and the wounded soldiers and the civilians in the bunker, the story of a human commander who had disobeyed his orders because he refused to slaughter the helpless. When Al finished speaking, the council chamber was silent. High Counselor Hose was the first to speak. His voice was heavy with confusion. You are telling us that this human, this killer of thousands, has been honoring our dead for 22 years, that he risked his career and his life to save civilians. Yes, Al said, I am. This is impossible, said sharply. Humans do not have honor. They proved this in the war. This must be some kind of trick. It is no trick, Al replied. I spent 3 days with this human. I looked into his eyes. I heard the pain in his voice. He carries the weight of what he did every day of his life. This is not a man pretending. This is a man who has suffered for his choices. Another counselor spoke up. Even if his story is true, he still entered our sacred ground without permission. He is still guilty of trespassing. He is guilty of many things, Al agreed. He killed our soldiers. He led the assault that brought death to Valley, but he also saved lives that day, and he has spent more than 20 years trying to honor those who fell. The debate continued for many hours. Some counselors wanted arrested and punished. Some wanted him banned from space forever. Some did not know what they wanted. It was old Ara who finally stood to speak. The keeper of the monument had been invited to attend the council session, and he had listened in silence until now. I have tended the monument for 40 years, he said. His voice was rough with age but steady. I have cleaned the names of 12,000 soldiers. I have watched families come to weep for their lost ones. I have performed the rites of remembrance more times than I can count. He looked around the chamber at each council member. In all those years, no outsider ever came to honor our dead. Not other species, not neutral parties, no one. Our fallen were forgotten by everyone except us. He paused. And then this human came. A human who had killed many of those 12,000 soldiers. A human who had every reason to celebrate their deaths. Instead, he brought flowers and whiskey and burial cloth. He came in secret, asking for nothing, expecting nothing. He came because he believed our dead deserved to be remembered. Ara's voice grew stronger. We have a word for such beings. We call them. It means one who carries honor in their chest like a second heart. One who does what is right even when no one is watching, even when it costs them everything. He looked directly at High Counselor Hose. This human is, I do not say this lightly, I say it because it is true. The chamber fell silent again. The word was ancient and sacred. It was not used often. To call someone was one of the highest honors I could give. After a long deliberation, the council made its decision. 1 year later, Cole made his annual journey to Aura. His body was weaker than the year before, and the trip was harder than ever. But he refused to stop. He had made a promise to the dead, and he would keep that promise as long as he lived. He landed his small ship in the valley and walked through the morning fog toward the monument. The black stone rose before him, covered with names he had memorized long ago. He carried his roses, his whiskey, his burial cloth, just as he had done every year for more than 2 decades. But this year was different. As he approached the monument, he saw that he was not alone. Ara stood at the base of the structure waiting for him. Behind the old keeper stood more than 100, veterans with scars from the war, families of the fallen wearing mourning colors, young soldiers who had never known battle, and standing among them Al stopped walking. His heart pounded in his chest. He had been discovered. He had known this day might come. He expected to be arrested, punished, sent away forever. But no one moved to seize him. No one shouted accusations or threats. Instead, Ara walked forward. In his hands he held something small and bright, a crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Cole, Ara said in careful, practiced English, you have walked our sacred ground for many years. You have honored our dead when you owed them nothing. You have shown respect when hatred would have been easier. Could not speak. His throat was too tight with emotion. Ara stopped in front of him and held out the crystal. This is a honor mark, he said. It is given only to the greatest warriors, only to those who have proven themselves worthy of the highest respect. We have never given one to an outsider before." He pressed the crystal into his trembling hands. "You are not our enemy, Cole. You are one who carries honor as a second heart, and you are welcome here." Look down at the crystal in his hands. It glowed against his weathered skin like a small star. He tried to speak, but no words came. For the first time in decades, the old soldier wept. Ara placed a hand on his arm. "Come," he said gently, "let us honor the dead together." They walked to the monument side by side, placed his roses at the base of the black stone. He poured his whiskey onto the ground as an offering. He laid the burial cloth carefully among the flowers. Then Ara stepped forward and began to sing. It was an ancient death song, a melody of loss and remembrance that had been sung for the fallen for thousands of years. The other joined in, their voices rising together in the morning air. Stood among them, tears streaming down his face, surrounded by the people he had once fought against, the people he had killed, the people who had now accepted him as one of their own. The song echoed through valley, carrying across the fields where so many had died 30 years ago. It rose toward the sky, toward the stars, toward wherever the spirits of the fallen had gone. Human and standing together, honoring the dead as one. Cole died peacefully 4 years later. In his final days, he asked to be buried on Aura, beside the monument he had tended for so long. They granted his request. His grave was marked with a simple stone bearing words in both English and script. The words said the same thing in both languages. "Here lies Cole. He fought with courage and he honored his enemies with grace. He was human." Visitors to the monument often stopped at his grave, and humans alike came to pay their respects. Some left flowers, some left whiskey, some simply stood in silence, thinking about what one old soldier had taught 2 species about the true meaning of honor. The story of Cole spread across both civilizations. It did not end the distrust between humans, and nothing so simple could heal wounds so deep, but it planted a seed. It showed that enemies could become something more. That honor knew no boundaries of species or history or war. And every year, on the anniversary of the battle's final day, both humans and gathered at the monument in Valley. They stood together in the morning fog. They shared whiskey and told stories of the fallen. They remembered those who had died, and they honored the man who had taught them how to remember. Cole had spent his whole life carrying the weight of what he had done. In the end, that weight had become a bridge. A bridge between 2 peoples. A bridge built on honor. A bridge that would stand forever.